G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the differences, the pros and cons of a Landcruiser 200 series and a Landcruiser Prado 150 series. So this video is going to be great for those who are thinking about buying a new car and trying to decide between these two vehicles. So stay tuned and let's get straight into it. So today we're going to discuss a whole lot of different categories and different comparisons between the vehicles. So we're going to talk about things like power, comfort, size, drivability, off-road capabilities, availability for modifications, and the price as well. So we're going to compare all these things, have a discussion around it. Now before we start, if you are new to the channel or haven't watched my videos before, just so you know, we are comparing a 2014 Prado 150 series in Australia here. This is a 4-cylinder 3-litre turbo diesel, and this is a 2014 Toyota Landcruiser 200 series, and this is a 4.5-litre V8 twin turbo diesel. So we do have a little bit of experience with both these vehicles. So we originally purchased the Prado 150 series. We bought this with only 14,000 kilometers on the clock, and it was stock as. So we have experience with this car as a fully stock format, but we also built it ourselves as well to make it look like it does today, with a whole lot of the modifications designed for touring and four-wheel driving. We had this vehicle for about 2 years, and we did about 70 or so thousand kilometers, both around town driving, highway driving, and a fair bit of off-road and towing our 2.5-ton Jayco caravan as well. So with the 200 series Landcruiser, we've also purchased that in a complete stock form. So we've had that vehicle now for almost 2 years, and this vehicle here we also built up from stock as well. So we did the same sort of modifications to the 200 series to suit four-wheel driving and touring. Now we've both driven this vehicle in stock format and also the same sort of around town, highway and off-road driving styles. So we can compare both these vehicles in their stock format as well as their modified, and we can discuss some of the options and things that we've noted along the way. Okay guys, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the physical dimensions, the size and the weight of these vehicles. This is probably one of the biggest differences, or at least the biggest perceived difference between these two vehicles as well. So we're going to start with the Prado behind me. So we've got some of the measurements and weights here. Keep in mind the models are going to affect these slightly, and also different variants will have different options which will increase or decrease the measurements and weights. But in general, the Prado here behind me is about 4,995 millimeters long. So that's from the front of the plastic stock bar all the way to the tip of the rear spare wheel. You're looking at 1,885 mil wide and 1,860 mil high from stock. Now the weights on this vehicle, you're looking at about 2,330 kilograms tear, and about 2,990 kilos for its GVM. So you've got a few hundred kilos there in loading capacity, still a fairly light vehicle and fairly compact when you look at its size. Okay, so moving on to the 200 series Landcruiser. Now the Cruiser here is 4,990 millimeters long. Now if you compare that with the Prado, you're actually looking at 5 millimeters shorter for the 200 series, which is the only dimension or weight that is lower than the Prado. However, it is that 5 mil shorter. Now you're looking at 1,980 mil wide. So you're looking at just over 10 centimeters wider than that of the Prado. 1,970 mil high, again from factory, so you're looking at about 11 centimeters higher than that of the Prado. Now weights significantly heavier here for the 200 series. So the tear weight, you're looking at 2,700 kilos and a GVM of 3,350 kilos. Now I have done a weight video on both of these vehicles modified, and you'll see how quickly those GVM fills up, how important it is to measure and weigh your vehicles and then do the modifications to suit, aka doing a GVM upgrade. So the next thing I want to talk about is on-road drivability and how it feels for a day-to-day driver and also as a tourer on the highway. So first I will talk about is the Prado here. So picking up the Prado stock standard, it's a very comfortable vehicle to drive. One thing you'll note with the Prado when you compare it to the 200 series is its drivability on road feels a lot more like that of a car rather than a large SUV. It's more responsive to less input, it feels more agile, and it's just a very comfortable car to drive around. Now this Prado we have here is a GXL model, which means it does not come with KDSS or Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System, which is a suspension system from Toyota to reduce body roll. One thing we did notice with the Prado, especially when it was stock standard, is its body roll. It does have a tendency to lean to the outside around corners. Now we've modified the suspension system on this vehicle by putting in a 2-inch lift kit. We've also put airbag helpers in the back. So we went for 0 to 250 kilo constant load springs in the rear with those airbag helpers, and it did stiffen up the suspension a bit and it eliminated some of that body roll. However, it was still there and it was still noticeable. Now with the 200 series Landcruiser, we also had that from stock. Now this is a Sahara model Landcruiser, so it does come with the KDSS suspension system from factory with the Sahara option, which means it's a hydraulic assisted suspension system to control the sway bars and reduce that body roll when you're on road. So we can't compare model to model for GXLs without the KDSS. However, we do note that the 200 series is a much heavier feeling vehicle on road, but however, it does have superior comfort over the Prado. The KDSS system eliminates almost all of the body roll, and it's extremely comfortable tourer on the highway, but it's also a reasonably comfortable daily driver as well. You do feel like you have to put a little bit more input into the accelerator pedal, and it does feel that little bit sluggish or a bit of lag in that turbo there when you're at the lights or driving around town. However, overall, it's a very, very comfortable vehicle. Now again, we've also done a suspension upgrade on the 200 series Landcruiser, and that included a GVM upgrade as well. So we have put in a 2-inch lift kit by ARB, but this time we've gone for the 400 kilo constant rear springs. We've also added in the same airbag helper kit, and that's stiffened up the suspension again. Overall, it's still retained a very nice feel, very little body roll, and still a very comfortable car to drive, both around town and for long distances on the highway. Now, talking about drivability on road, and just after mentioning some of the weights and dimensions, you'd think that the Prado, even though it feels a lot more agile, is significantly easier and has a shorter turning circle. However, from factory and from Toyota specifications, the turning circle on the Prado 150 is 11.6 meters. Now on the Landcruiser 200 series, it's 11.8 meters. Now that difference there is very negligible. Even though it's a much larger car, much heavier car, it feels a lot bigger. It only has a 20 centimeter wider radius for doing a U-turn. So a good thing to note if you are planning on driving these things around town. Okay, so let's move on to the off-road ability or the full drivability of these vehicles. So we'll start here with the Prado 150 series. Now for us, we've done a few trips with this Prado 150. We towed a van across Australia. We've also gone down the Great Central Road, which is an 1,000-kilometre unsealed road, towing a caravan. We've also done tracks like the Holland track, along with your regular beach driving in places like Esperance in Western Australia. So we've had a fair variety of different driving styles, towing and unladen as well. And one thing we do note with the Prado is it has a very, very effective and very useful traction control system. There only is one setting for the traction control system, however we found it very, very helpful in a lot of different circumstances, and it was enough to get us through almost every obstacle. The only terrain that we won't use traction control systems in is sand. It does prove to be a bit of a hindrance there, however every other situation it does work. Now, because of the system works so well, we didn't actually invest in diff locks, and that was the reason we didn't. We just didn't need them, nor would we get the value for money from them because of that awesome traction control system. One advantage with the Prado 150 series we found is that weight. Being that few hundred kilos lighter than the 200 series, you can definitely feel it. It feels a lot more agile, and it feels like you have the ability to skip over ruts rather than just sliding down and falling into them. One drawback for the Prado, however, is the lack of clearance. The transfer case and some other mechanical components do sit a little bit lower than the chassis rails in the center, reducing that ramp over angle, and the fact that it has an inability to fit larger tires equivalent to that of what we have fitted on the 200 series can impede on that clearance just a little bit, meaning it does get hung up that little bit more. So off-roading with the 200 series is very much similar. They have a very similar traction control system that works very, very well, very efficiently and effectively. Now, being the Sahara model, you do get the multi-terrain select system, which does take it to the next level. However, we can't really compare that when we're comparing it with a GXL Prado. So the factory traction control system is still very effective, just as it is on the Prado. And again, we've also decided not to invest in diff lockers or other traction aids because of this system. So one disadvantage or drawback with the 200 series is the weight. Like I mentioned with the Prado 150 series, it is a light vehicle. This vehicle here, you can definitely feel that weight behind you. When you load it up for a camping trip and modified like it is, that 3.5 ton definitely makes itself feel known. Now, when you're trying to go around tracks or comparing it directly side by side with the Prado, you do see the Landcruiser 200 series slide into ruts when you're trying to avoid them. This is just simply because of the weight. Pull it down into the lowest point of the track. Now with that, it does seem that you do have to put a little bit more acceleration or a little bit more input into the vehicle to get it through obstacles. However, the engine and the power definitely makes up for that. One big advantage for the 200 series though is its ease and ability to fit larger tyres straight from factory or just with a simple 2-inch lift kit. Now with both of these vehicles, there are modifications you can make to fit large tyres. However, we're not talking about serious modifications, we're just talking about easy wheel and tyre replacements to fit for a 2-inch lift kit. You're able to fit something like a 34 and maybe even squeeze into a 35 with a little bit of guard modification on the 200 series, whereas the Prado, you're looking at maybe a max of 33, again with guard modifications. With no modifications at all, we're running about a 31.6 on the Cruiser at the Prado at the moment. We're running a 33.6 on the 200. So the next topic I want to talk about is fuel consumption. So with the Prado 150 series, like I mentioned, we first bought this vehicle stock. Now we managed to do a fair bit of driving with this, particularly on the highway, as we do live in a regional area, in a completely stock form. Now on average, we're not talking about high power runs or really slow runs, just on average for town driving and highway driving, we're looking at 9.5 litres per 100 kilometres in a stock format, unladen. So that's pretty impressive for a vehicle this size and this weight. However, doing all these modifications to the vehicle, we did see that change. Now I do have a dedicated video to all the modifications we have done and the setup we've done to this vehicle. However, in brief, we've added roof racks, bar work, larger tyres, and a fair bit of extra weight in terms of accessories, batteries, and winches. Now we did the same sort of driving, the town driving and the highway driving, and we managed to get that fuel consumption to 12.5. So it's still fairly reasonable, fairly efficient, and something that I would be happy to pay for in an urban area if you are just using this vehicle as a day-to-day driver. During our time of owning this Prado 150 series, we also bought a 2.5 tonne Jayco caravan, and we use this vehicle to tow it a fair bit. Now the fuel consumption for towing this van does vary significantly depending on conditions. However, on average, in a reasonable condition on a highway, towing at 100 kilometres an hour would see a fuel consumption around the 17 to 18 litre per 100 kilometre mark. So again, still fairly good, but that does obviously put a lot more strain on the small capacity engine. The worst sort of fuel economy we got towing the van was up around the 23 to 24 litre mark. However, that was with a strong headwind and some unfavourable towing conditions. Like I mentioned, we bought this vehicle in stock form as well, and we did do a little bit of highway driving with this vehicle with no modifications and unladen as well. Now on the highway, we managed to get the fuel consumption of this car down to a flat 10 litres per 100 kilometres, which is very impressive for a vehicle of this size and weight. However, around town driving, you're looking about 12 to 13 realistically, again, stock and unmodified. Now we've done very similar modifications to the 200 series, and again I have a full video dedicated to listing and detailing all of those modifications, but again, just like the 150 series Prado, we're looking at larger tyres, bar work, batteries, winches and a roof rack. Now adding all those modifications to this vehicle, we did notice a fair increase in fuel consumption, particularly that of town driving. So on average for this vehicle, we get around the 16 litre per 100 kilometre mark in a built-up urban area. And on the highway, we're looking at about 13 litres per 100 kilometres, and that's not load up or towing. So you can see there that the proportion of that increase in fuel is significant, even with that larger, torquier engine. Now towing, we also towed the same 2.5 tonne caravan that we towed with the Prado on the back of this Landcruiser 200 series. Now we also got around the 18 to 20 litre per 100 kilometre mark on a highway in the similar conditions that we towed with the Prado 150, and the worst we ever saw was around the 25 litre per 100 kilometres, and again with headwind and unfavourable towing conditions. So it's just a few litres in every scenario more than the Prado uses. However, it's nothing too terrible. It's something that we were willing to put up with given the benefits this vehicle does have. Okay, so moving on to some of the interior features and comforts of these vehicles. So like I mentioned before, this is a 2014 GXL model, and one thing to note when comparing the Prado to the 200 series Landcruiser GXL models is that the Prado comes very well appointed and probably has a little bit more in terms of its features and niceties on the inside. When driving this vehicle, it definitely feels more like a car rather than a large SUV or truck style vehicle like the 200 does, and it's just a very agile and easy vehicle to drive. The power steering is very effective, the steering feels nice and light and accurate, and you also have a nice stock standard infotainment system and basic trip computer features. The vehicle comes standard with things like dual zone climate control, and also has plenty of blanks left in the dash to add all those aftermarket accessories, switches to make your touring and forward driving a little bit more comfortable and convenient. So sitting in the driver's seat of the 200 series, it definitely has a significant difference over the Prado 150 series. You can feel the extra width, it feels a lot roomier inside, and it definitely feels more like a dedicated touring off-road vehicle. Now driving this day to day, That's where it does have a bit of a drawback. You can definitely feel its weight. It feels like a heavy, big car, and it feels like it's more suited and more at home on the highway than it is in an urban built-up area. Now the vehicle does come out with a lot of the features that the GXL Prado comes out with. However, the display on this particular 2014 model for the GXL variants isn't quite as sophisticated or as neat looking as that of the Prado 150 series, in my opinion. Like I mentioned, this is a Sahara model cruiser, so it's a bit unfair to compare some of the interior features with this vehicle with the Prado we have here today. But with the GXL, you still get things like dual zone climate control. However, you're missing things like a fancy infotainment system and some of the other niceties and factory look features of the Prado 150. With these 200s, you definitely are paying for the off-road capability, and in particular, that big V8 engine down the front. So moving on to the engine and driveline of these vehicles, this is where we're going to see some of the biggest differences between these two models. On the Prado 150 series here, you're looking at a 4-cylinder 3-litre turbo diesel paired up with a dual range gearbox. Now here, this engine here produces 127 kilowatts of power and 410 newton meters of torque. So nothing too drastic, but it's enough to do what most people do with these vehicles. Now again, I've modified this vehicle when I owned it, put larger tyres, made it heavier, and also put on that 2.5 ton caravan, and this vehicle did everything we asked of it. So the only time I ever thought we needed a little bit more power in this vehicle was either while towing or while we're doing some off-road soft sand climbs. Otherwise, we're very happy with the performance of the engine. The D4D 3-litre turbo diesel is a reliable and renowned engine, very easy to find parts for and very cost effective. So the engine fitted to this 200 series Landcruiser is the D4D V8 4.5-litre twin turbo diesel. Now this here is probably the reason this vehicle costs so much more than the Prado 150 series. This is one powerhouse of an engine putting out 195 kilowatts of power and 650 newton meters of torque. Now this here is one of the biggest differences that you can feel with the 200 series while driving it over something like the Prado 150. Once those turbos engage, the power in this vehicle is significantly more than that of the Prado 150 series. That and the torque that goes along with it is noticed both unladen or towing a van. So going along with the power and engines of these vehicles as well comes towing. Now these vehicles are often used to tow heavy loads or maybe even light loads in box trailers. But for us, we used both these vehicles to tow the same identical 2.5 ton caravan whilst owning them both modified as they are here. So with the Prado, like I said, the engine is good, it gets you where you need to go. However, this is one of the limitations when towing something like a caravan. This particular 2014 model only has a towing capacity of 2.5 ton, which means it was maxed out when we're towing our van. Now, we got everywhere we needed to go. We never got stuck as such. However, you definitely feel that power, or feel the lack of power there going up hills. It's not going to hold 100 kilometers an hour going up a long, windy hill, or even a long straight hill for that matter. When you do come up to something steep, you'll notice the gearbox will drop down a couple of gears. The engine will start to rev quite high, and you'll still seem to lose speed. Now, I didn't have too many instruments there measuring temperatures on this vehicle, whether it's the gearbox or EGTs, and whether or not it is the EGTs getting too high and the computer powering down, or whether simply the lack of power there just to maintain that speed. Either way, the vehicle can't hold speed going up steep inclines like that. Now moving on to the 200 series, the engine here is a powerhouse while towing. You straight away notice that extra power, that torque, and when you hook on a van, of course you're going to feel it's there. However, the difference you're going to feel between unladen and fully laden towing driving is not as significant as that of the Prado 150 series. It pulls really, really hard. You're able to maintain speed almost everywhere, and if you do get stuck in some off-road situations, you have that power to pull you through and get those wheels spinning if you need to. If you are planning on towing a lot, super heavy loads, or potentially going full-time traveling, then something like a 200 series, just for that engine, that extra power and that torque, is something you're really going to want to seriously consider. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is the price. For a brand new Toyota Prado these days, you're looking at around $74,000. Now, don't get me wrong, there are deals to be had, and it's going to depend on models, locations, and all those things. We're just taking an average there of about $74,000 brand new for this car here. Now, for a brand new 200 series GXL, you're looking at about $94,000, give or take. Now, it doesn't matter which model you go in either of the variants, you're looking at that range of approximately $20,000 more for the 200 series Landcruiser. So if budget is a constraint for you when looking for a new car, then the Prado is probably going to be the better option. However, if you do have that little bit of extra, able to save up a little bit more, the 200 series is definitely an option worth considering. So we've talked a little bit about the two vehicles and some of the differences and what we've noted between the two. So what we're going to do now is have a little bit of an open discussion about whether we do anything differently and what we do and don't enjoy about each of the vehicles. So what's out of these two vehicles, what do you reckon you would choose again?
I prefer the 200 series. I love the power and I love the stability of the 200. The distinct lack of body roll was a big thing for me. For a small family, I do enjoy the size of the interior cabin and the ease of the tailgate, especially when we're on long journeys. We can just pull up, put the tailgate down, and we've got a table or a change mat. It's very easy. As we live regionally, the lack of traffic and built-up areas, the size of the vehicle doesn't bother me driving around. But for families that live in town, I do believe the Prado would be a better option, but overall the 200 is my option.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of driving with both these vehicles now, and I know that you mentioned their stability was one of those things, and you know, I do most of the four-wheel driving and almost all the highway driving when we're driving as a family, and there were many occasions in the Prado when we'd be driving along and Tegan would feel a little bit unsteady with the Prado's body roll. And this is both not so much unsteady on the road as such, but when you hit the tracks, you used to feel almost as if the vehicle's going to tip. It wasn't at that tipping point, nor did I have any stresses, but it definitely feels a little bit more top heavy. It doesn't feel quite as planted as a 200. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
So there definitely is that, and that's noticeable. I think a little bit would come down to the KDSS suspension system that Toyota have with the Sahara model, but even saying that, the 200 just, I think it feels like it has the ability just to soak up your off-road tracks a little bit easier and a little bit more comfortable. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing we didn't really talk about, and Tegan's mentioned here, is the back. So with the Prado, you get that one solid barn door, which works okay. There are some benefits for it, but I really do believe that tailgate, like you mentioned, has a huge range of benefits, it's particularly for young families, but also just for campers. I think having the ability to fold that bottom section of the tailgate down, end up with another table section there. For us, it's been, like you said, awesome with kids, being able to change them, get lunches ready, pull things out of the fridge and stick them down. And then again, when it's raining, you've got that, you know, we put a light up on the roof there, it shines down over the back section, plus it protects you from the rain and whatnot. So there's a couple of good points there that we've missed during the comparison. So if we were living in a built-up area, like a major city, would you still choose a 200 over a Prado?
Probably the Prado, because of the ease of driving around town. But for what we do and where we live, definitely 200.
Yep. So it does just come down to a compromise. It's what suits your family and your needs. For us, four-wheel driving, touring, camping, it's more of a lifestyle for us. It's not just that odd occasion at Easter or Christmas we get away. We get away as often as we can, and you know, our holidays revolve around however we can get out in a car, go camping, or just go exploring. So for us, the 200 wins hands down, I reckon, for our lifestyle. So one interesting thing I think we picked up during this comparison as well is just getting some of those physical size specifications when doing the research for this video. You know, even though this Prado does feel a lot more agile than a 200, you know, the turning circle is only 20 centimeters difference. So realistically, it's not going to be a huge difference in an urban area. It's just more the perception and the feel, I guess. Would you agree with that a little bit? Like you definitely feel like you're in a bigger car. I'm not sure whether it's just the physical dimension of the bonnet or whether it's the interior cabin space, and probably a little bit with the heavier steering as well. But overall, you know, there's no dramas to living with one in an urban area or a built-up area. It's just a matter of whether you feel comfortable driving it. But if you live like us, you tow something and you're going away frequently, I mean, for us, the extra money we saved up and purchased the 200 series was definitely worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
So look guys, that's a bit of a comparison between the two vehicles and our thoughts on the Prado 150 and the 200 series. Look, I hope it's given you guys some ideas to think about some things if you're purchasing a vehicle for your family and for your needs. In the end, like I said, it's all personal preference. It's how often you use the vehicle, what you use it for, and whether or not budget is going to be one of those constraints. But for us, 200 almost every time is going to be the vehicle of choice for us. It's a comfortable vehicle, it's capable, and it's really, really well suited for families and for towing large loads like caravans and campers. So thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.